Welcome to the Pastured Pig Podcast, where we share the successes and challenges of raising pigs on pasture. We talk to producers all over the country, from small homesteads to large commercial pasture operations. Whether you're new to pastured pigs or have been raising hogs for decades, we hope you hear new ideas and new perspectives on pasturing hogs. Here's your host, Troy McClung.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the Pastured Pig Podcast. As always, I'm your host, Troy. Excited to have another podcast episode out, and actually somewhat on time. It is Monday, and so here we are. This is the date I was shooting for, and it's the date that I actually hit. I say that. I've yet to upload this as I'm recording the bumpers. Let's see if it crashes and burns. If you're hearing this, then it worked. Well, as always, I want to do a shout out real quick to our Patreon supporters, our sponsors, Patreon supporters, and just thank those, no matter what tier you're at. I appreciate your parting with some hard-earned money to obviously keep the podcast alive. It justifies all the foolishness that we deal with here, the additional expenses, the hard drives we have to purchase, and software upgrades and all that great stuff. So I want to give a shout out specifically to our board tier. This is top level sponsors. They're $15 a month. Again, really is the foundation that holds the podcast together. So thanks to John, Mark, Tina, Chuck, Fritz, Noah, Rob, Matt, and Tango Papa. All right, so updates. Well, my goodness, this is going to be interesting. This is a cry in your beer moment type of thing. So as you guys, if you followed the podcast for a while, you know that in January 22nd, I took my 3 remaining breed stock, my boar, Mongo, and our 2 sows, took those to be processed because we're retiring that line, going to start new. And I took them to our USDA, our state-of-the-art USDA processor that I've used the past several times. I've had some issues with them, things that I think, okay, they're working out the kinks. They're 3-4 years old now, still trying to get into the groove. So I've had some grace there. Well, this time, this processing basically turned into a Greek tragedy. So I took the 3, and on the 22nd, and I kept calling, kept checking. No, we don't have your smoke stuff yet. Your grind and everything else is ready, but we don't have your smoke stuff yet. We'll call you when it's already okay. Thinking, wow, why does it take so long? And just kept getting mixed stories. It's like, well, we have to send it out to be smoked, and no, the smoker's right here, but we got to get enough to fire it up. I'm like, well, if you don't have enough, if you're USDA processor in the central part of our state, you're not getting enough pork to fire up the smoker at least once a week. That seems kind of odd to me. Oh, no, we get tons of pork. We get blah, 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 all this type of stuff. And it just could not get a straight answer out of anybody. It was everybody had their own perception, whoever I talked to. Well, it finally came to the end of this month. It was ridiculous. It was exactly 2 months. And I called them and I said, hey, this just doesn't make any sense. Why is my stuff not ready? And they said, oh, no, it's ready. Come on down and get it. I'm like, oh, wow, what a coincidence. It just happened to be ready the day I call and have to lean on somebody. So I go down there a couple days later, next time I was in town. Go in. They roll out a cart that has about 6 boxes on it. Now, here you go. Here's everything. And the person takes my credit card and, okay, I'm going to go to the back office and run your credit card and everything. So I'm sitting there looking, I was like, wait a minute. 3 very large hogs should not fit into 6 boxes. So we started going through the boxes, and all we had was the bacon, and we had fat, leaf fat, and back fat, and the sets of tenderloins for the 3. Now, when for context, on my cut sheet, I had asked them to grind everything but the bacon, the tenderloins, and of course, the remaining fat. So the majority of these 3 hogs should have been grind. So I point that out. Hey, check it out. You guys are getting ready to send me out. You had my truck loaded and everything ready to say goodbye, and there's no grind. What gives? So they spend a half hour going around looking for the grind, and finally the manager comes to me and says, I am so sorry. We have lost every bit of your grind. We can't find any of it. Which to me is just absolutely mind-numbing. How do you lose? That should have been about 400 pounds of meat. Just gone. Just disappeared. And the manager was telling me, well, we've actually had a little bit of theft with some of our employees. We had to let go and some of those things. And I'm like, but who steals 400 pounds of meat? And how do they get away with that? Because it's not something you smuggle in your overcoat unless you did it, a couple pounds a day. You snuck out. So I just was shocked. I mean, just absolutely shocked. And of course they do the typical thing a processor does. Hey, we'll get some hogs slaughtered and we'll give you the equivalent of that in grind. Whatever you want, we'll get it processed and get it to you. It's like, well, as I run into this all the time, if I just wanted to go buy commercial pigs, that's what they're going to get, then I just go to Walmart and buy that stuff. I don't want that. That's the whole point in raising things on my farm, on pasture, in the woods, all that type of selecting the breed, choosing to feed them the way I feel. All of that stuff. It just all goes to waste. And it is so frustrating. And I know you guys are probably like, man, Troy, all you do is complain about processing. Well, I hope that's not the perception you're getting. But every time I run into processing, yes, it is just a nightmare. And I cannot just the whole point of that, the frustration level of taking all this time to raise your animal, do the things you do, animal husbandry, the care you give it, and then that very last moment you take it and you have to, because the government tells you to, you have to turn it over to somebody else so they can process it, and they do this type of thing. And like I said, this is the state-of-the-art USDA facility. This is the one that our government, our state government was touting as this is going to correct all of our central state processing woes. And so, yeah, I'm just done. Obviously, no money changed hands there. And if you think about it, okay, yeah, I still came up short because obviously I lost all that meat, even though I didn't have to pay for any of the processing. Why would you pay for something you didn't get, even though you got bacon and fat and all that? But yeah, I'm just done. It's just done. It's like, yeah, I'm not going to fight you guys on this. I'm just done. And so, that's when I just have to cross off the list. Never, ever, ever use that processor again. And if anybody asks, I will say, hey, never use this processor. So if my regional people, my local people, if they want to know who that processor is, just email me. I'll let you know. I don't necessarily want this out on the World Wide Webs on the voice recording, just because of, liability concerns there, slander, all that type of stuff, even though I've got all the reason to be able to state what I'm stating because it's 100% true and I have the evidence to back it up. But anyway, if you want to know who that is, some of you guys can read between the lines. You local people, you know who I'm talking about. So anyway, very, very frustrating. So, as a person who is a glutton for punishment, I shall not be deterred. You may be the turd, but I'm not going to be the turd. No, I will not be deterred. We are going to get pigs on the property. So that's our positive note is this Saturday, I'm heading to Virginia to Revercombe Farm. And if that sounds familiar to you, that would be Mindy Lipinski. And we had her on almost exactly a year ago. She was episode 116. And I met Mindy years ago, actually, at the HOA. Had some good conversation going. Been kind of following what she's been doing with her farm, with her pigs. She does a lot of classes and training on farms. Just has that attention to detail I like, and she really cares for animals. Has an affinity for her animals. Has an affinity for farming and having people on the farm. So all of those things, are in my checkbox of, this is somebody that I want to trust with providing me feeders. So Mindy is providing me 6, and these are Berkshire boar with I think she said a blue butt sow. So this will be an interesting combo. I've not had Berks before. I've had almost everything else, it seems like, but not Berks yet. So we're gonna try those out. So Saturday we're gonna go over to Virginia. We're gonna pick up 6 of these feeders, bring those wee devils home and put them on the red tool house. So excited to have pigs back on farm. And what we're going to do this time is we are going to totally go around USDA processing. We are not going to process anything for cuts. I'm going back to the KISS principle, man. We're going to just, out of these 6 pigs, 2 we'll keep for ourselves. That's our personal consumption that we do every year. The other 4 I will sell as whole and half. And we are going to take to a custom processor who again, I like using. And because they're not USDA, obviously I couldn't use them for cuts, but we're just going back to that. It's one of those things. It's like, how can a business flourish if you can't have control of your final product? So anyway, so that's what we're going to do. Lord willing, and the creek don't rise this fall, we will take those 6 pigs to a custom processor and sell some of those as wholes and halves and enjoy the rest for ourselves. We shall see. Unfortunately, I hope this just isn't another chapter in the saga of processing woes in Central West Virginia, but such is life. Okay, let's talk about this episode's channel sponsor, or this episode's podcast episode sponsor. Switch gears here. I'm going to self-promote again. So this time we are on Red Tool House Store. So our store, website store, redtoolhouse.com, store.redtoolhouse.com. Obviously, I'll put a link below in the show description so you can check it out. But I posted on our Facebook group, our Pastured Pig Facebook group the other day, some mock-up samples of some hats that I want to produce. This idea of kind of coming up with pig life apparel. So it's not branded Red Tool House. It's not branded even the Pastured Pig Podcast. It's just focused around pigs. And I think that's kind of reaches a broader audience. I don't expect people to wear my brand all over the place. It's just is what it is. But this first hat that we're rolling out is a pig snout hat. So I posted some designs of some pig hooves and some pig snouts, different colors, different type things like that. Had some comments on that, gave me a little direction, had some additional people reach out to some things offline and discuss some stuff. So with that, we're rolling out this first of what we may do multiples. We'll just see how it goes. We're doing a very limited run right now. But our pig snout hat is what I think is pretty cool. So it's a black hat with our neon or our pig snout embroidered on the front in either neon green or neon orange. You've got those two options there. So black on orange or black on green, I think looks pretty cool. And this is since it's black, it's a perfect accessory for evening wear. When you have those formal gatherings, but you still need to let people know you aren't afraid to get dirty. So you can check it out at our web store, store.redtoolhouse.com, or like I said, there'll be a link down here in the show notes. All right, so this episode's guest is Neal Saxton with Trifecta Natural Pork out of Colorado. And we had an absolutely great discussion. Neal has over 40 years of experience in raising pigs. Basically, has raised pigs since he was a little kid, but 40 years professionally of raising pigs. But also because he would say he's getting into the sunset years of his career. Neal talks about near the end, he's looking at a farm takeover / buyout opportunity with somebody that would want to do that, would want to take over what he has going on there in Colorado. So if you're interested in that, listen to the end, because we get into that near the end of the details. And it's a really interesting conversation. So his experience, the herd that he's built, the business that he has, he's sells a lot of his product, of course. And then, of course, the farm and the property, the layout, he's looking to transition all of that to somebody who wants to take over. So it'd be an opportunity to mentor under him and then, of course, pick up where he is ready to leave off. So interesting conversation. And I also want to say, I think I mentioned this in the interview, a big shout out to Neal for doing this interview twice. In the 139 episodes that I've done, this is Neal's previous interview that I did a couple weeks earlier, was the first time I'd ever lost an entire interview. And it wasn't that it just didn't save. It's the first 6 or 9 minutes were fine, and then it just was dead air for 50 some minutes, which is just ridiculous. But still haven't quite figured out why that happened. Even all my inputs showed that it was. But anyway, so special thanks to Neal for coming back, doing it again. I think second time was even better because we got to drill down some stuff and kind of, I think we kind of compressed more into the hour-long conversation. But I will stop talking and we'll let Neal pick up, and I'll catch you guys on the tail end of the conversation. Today we're out west. We're going to Colorado, and we're talking with Neal Saxton of Trifecta Natural Park. Natural pork, trifecta natural pork. My goodness, it's already going to show itself tonight, Neil. Welcome, Neil.
Thank you, Troy. Thanks for having me on.
All right. Well, in the goal of being totally transparent, if you guys listen to these podcasts in series, then you'll know last week I was bemoaning the issues I was having with some technical things and how I lost a podcast interview. Well, that is who I'm talking to now. So Neil, unfortunately, has had to come back and talk to me yet again. But I appreciate his willingness to come back on the podcast, and you're going to love it. I've heard this one before, and I'll tell you it's a good one to listen to. So let's go through it again. Appreciate you doing that, Neil.
You're welcome. I don't know if it'd be the same. I'll probably tell a different story, but anyway.
Well, that's a good thing. The evidence is destroyed, so if something doesn't line up, there's going to be nobody to be able to check it. So, well, it was the first 6 minutes.
If I say something different.
Right. Yeah. The first 6 minutes. So the first 6 minutes is the only thing that's recorded that made it. So yeah, just make sure the first 6 minutes cooperate.
Okay.
All right. So all that aside, tell me about Trifecta Natural Pork. Give me that 40,000 foot elevation about your setup, and then we want to get into some of the history.
Okay. We're located in Yuma, Colorado, which is in the plains of Colorado, northeast plains of Colorado. We're about roughly 2 hours from Denver, Colorado, straight east. We raise some meat hogs here. I have a small show pig herd, and I raise some purebred Yorkshires on top of it. So we're about a 50 sow herd. We supply meat to basically the Front Range area, which is about 2 hours away, Fort Collins, basically. I do have a guy in Montana that picks up some meat from me, and then I sell to some just families and so forth also, and I sell a few feeder pigs also on from time to time. Yeah. We've been doing it about the meat part. We've been doing about 15 years, maybe a little bit longer than that, somewhere in there. And we produce basically a Duroc Burke product with Mangalisa in that mix also. That's kind of inconsistent maybe, but we do mainly have Burke Durocs with a little bit of Mang in it at time to time.
Yeah. Okay. Well, let's go back a little bit and talk about, obviously the first thing I think of being a East Coaster is when I think of Colorado, of course, usually think of Rocky Mountains and all that, but you said you're on the eastern part, so you're in the plains. And when we say plains, we're talking tabletop flat here, right?
Oh yeah. We can see quite a ways away. There's some windmills. They're located, like over an hour away, and you can see them flashing and so forth. So it's pretty flat. That's one of our struggles here in northeastern Colorado, is especially the last few years, we've been super, super dry. Yeah. And so I race pigs on large open lots and so forth, but haven't really dipped wholeheartedly into the pasture pigs yet, but plan on maybe experimenting a little bit with that in terms of maybe doing some pie shape fencing there out on our pasture ground here. We have, where I sit here, there's actually 160 acres here. Yeah. But there's about 40 acres of true pasture ground. But I mean, I don't want to put them out on dirt and so forth and then have it blow all the time too. So the timing of it's going to have to be about right to do that.
Yeah. I mean, that's interesting. So tabletop flat, but you said kind of arid. Is this still high elevation? Where are we here?
We're about at 4,000 feet. Okay. Yep.
And so being on that side, the downward slope of the Rockies, you guys probably get your butt kicked pretty good from storms on a regular basis, I bet.
Yeah, I always talk about the Akron Hill, which is, excuse me, which is about 30 minutes away. And of course, you got the mountains there, but it seems like it kind of dips down from the south there in Canada, and some wild storms that start hitting here on south a lot of times. And we can get some nasty windstorms, blizzards, and so forth. And I mean,
Mm.
we did have some here lately that just kind of missed us and hit the eastern and the southern part of us actually there. So we're kind of on the edge of that usually.
Yeah, yeah. So with it being, is the aridness, is that just you guys are going through a couple years of drought, or is that's what's expected for that type of topography, that microclimate in that area?
No, I mean we raise dryland wheat, and we have since I was a kid and so forth,
Hmm.
and my parents and grandparents raised dryland wheat in this area, and I mean a lot of years the wheat for dryland is really good, and people are raising dryland corn in the area. However, last year the dryland corn wasn't very good, and I think the year before it wasn't very good either. So it's kind of been drier maybe than normal. I mean, our winter this last winter has been super dry, as a lot of places actually. But I mean, we're hoping for some water this spring and so forth. But yeah, for the most part, we can raise some crops there. I think we're in the what is it, about 12 inches of rain, maybe a little bit more than that. I think we had 10 last year or
Yeah.
something in
Okay.
a year. But yeah,
Yeah, it's not terrible then. Yeah, we're
yeah,
not talking desert, high desert or anything there.
right,
All right.
right.
Well, neat. All right, very good. So, well, let's do this, and because I remember this, I think it's definitely worth getting into as the conversation goes. Is the history. So, this is not your first rodeo when it comes to pigs. In fact, if you don't mind, let's talk about the experience you have, Neil, because I think as our audience listens to this, they're going to appreciate not only your background, your education, but just the experience you have in raising pigs throughout the whole spectrum of pig operations. So if you wouldn't mind you don't have to tell me I was born on a dark and stormy night, but go back as far as you dare there and fill us in on some of the history.
Well, I'll go back a ways here, and you can cut me off if I or interrupt me or whatever. It's kind of a little bit of a long story, but basically, I mean, I've been raising pigs my whole life. I went to the county fair at 3 years old and showed a pig in the open class, and so my family had pigs at that point. We raised purebred Durocs, and then my brother and I raised them. And before the 90s, there when the hog market went south big time with corporate farms and so forth like that. Right a year or so before that, we'd gotten out of the pig business and sold all the hogs, and so we didn't have any. And I went to work for it was called Western Pork at that time, and I started it with some other guys there, not from basically the ground up, but pretty close. We started with a 1,200 sow unit, and they'd planned on putting in 12,000 sows.
Wow.
And we started with a 1,200 sow unit that I started with another guy in the barn, breeding pigs and collecting boars and so forth for that. And then it grew to 12,000 sows. Excuse me. And I was in charge of several of the units and so forth like that. They were 2,400 sow units. And so at one point there, it changed and got to, was it Murphy Brown, I think it was, and next. And Western Pork had sold all their pigs for, what was it, $5 a pig or something when the market went all shot, and they sold out basically to Smithfield, and it was called Murphy Brown.
Wow.
And I started off running. I ran some sow farms there, 2,400 and 4,800 sows and so forth. And then I ran a 5,000 there, and then I ran 12,000 sows there. I was oversaw 12,000 sows there, and along with the boar stud, I was over 60 boars. And the breeding gilt project, I was over that also. So I did quite a bit corporate life in the pigs there for about 12 years. And then I left there, went to injection company, local injection company here that sells all across the world injection pumps that inject fertilizer, acid and so forth into water lines and so forth, into the center pivots and so forth, and like golf courses and everything. That's what we sold. And so I was the national sales manager there. shortly after I started working for them. And right after I quit the hogs, I that next month I bought a bred sow that was a purebred York sow, and I brought her in while I was working at the same time, and I finally got it built up to about 50 sows that included the purebred Yorks. That sow, I closed the herd basically down and brought her in and closed the herd. From that point on, I'd never brought in any other pigs to this farm since that time period, and that's been, I think we're on 20 years or so, somewhere in there. I lose track of time pretty fast, but I think it's been about at least 20 years ago.
And is that on? I'm sorry. Is that on the current? That's where you are now currently, physically, as the property where you are now. That was 20. You've been on this spot 20 years, and that's where you brought the herd in, closed it down.
Yeah. Well, I closed it then. But when we had the farm way back when my brother and I had the farm, it's on the same farm.
Oh,
same
okay.
place.
So this is family. Yeah, this is family land. Awesome.
So it's a family. It's a 3-generation
farmhouse
and farm and so forth. So I didn't have pigs on it there while I worked for Smithfield basically that whole time. But then as soon as I quit, my plan is to quit Smithfield, bring in that bred sow, and work off farm, to basically make money, because pigs weren't doing very much at that time, and there wasn't a meat market at that time. Well, I brought in the purebreds and was starting to line breed those. And shortly after that, I I decided that because I was a closed herd, I wanted to make some meat hogs, because I thought that would be rather popular to do. And that was before it really got hot and nobody was really doing it and so forth. And I guess I didn't really know how I was going to sell them and so forth. And I thought I'd figure that out later. I just wanted to get some good meat hogs started. And so I brought in, I AI'd to a Burke boar that was old line at that time. That was at, I believe I brought in that boar at Swine Genetics called Fat Albert. And it might have been I had another boar before that. I'm not sure the very first boar. But anyway, I AI'd to a Burke, got a litter of pigs there, and started breeding them. I call it basically synthetic Burks is what I was going to do. So I bred her again to a Burke, and then I started breeding uncle and aunts. And so the only way I could bring in semen and make a pure was to keep breeding them back to a pure line and line them up. And so in my mind, which I've been told by experts that can't happen and so forth, but I couldn't get them consistent enough. And I did. I got them really consistent by making a synthetic York or a synthetic Burke that was line bred. And so I got them to like 3/4. And at that point, I decided I wanted to bring in some Mang, because I'd heard that they had a little bit of more intermuscular marbling. Mm-hmm. And the Burks were really good, but it was deep red, but I wanted more marbling in my meat. And so I brought in the Mang, and that clicked pretty good on the Burks. And what was the best thing is when I started breeding and crossing them there, the whole idea basically was to leave the Yorks in the program because I wanted mothering ability.
Yeah.
And so my Yorks were line bred, and they were very, very good at raising pigs. And so I wanted that in my meat hogs, because I didn't want, 6 pigs per sow and so forth like that, like some of the purebreds can do to you, especially if they're not bred very good. And so when I bred them to the Mang, that's what I really liked about the Mang Burke hogs, is that they were very prolific. They were good moms. They go in the farrowing crate and lay down and have 10 to 12 pigs very easy on their own. I'd go outside, go into the farrowing house, and there would be, a litter of pigs, and they'd just be taking care of them. So they were very good in that combination. So I did that for a short while there. And then I thought what would be the best was to put that offspring, basically the Burke, on the Mang, mm-hmm. put a Duroc on that. Okay. And I did have some, at that time I was getting some volume. So I had some that were York Burke, and I put the Duroc on those too. which was a fantastic cross. And so I did them both there. So I had a little bit of both going at that time. That's kind of currently where I'm at as far as the genetics and so forth. And so that's kind of where we're at in terms of the breeding program is the problem with the Mang that I'm having a little bit of issue with is when you wean them, sometimes I don't get those sows bred back the way I think I should. And so that's probably the biggest part. And especially if you don't breed them right away after you wean them, that becomes a bigger part in trying to get them stuck sometimes. But other than that, they've been, very good. And they're so highly line bred and inbred because there's not a lot of Mangs in the country that they really breed true. And so after I ate some pigs, and that's kind of how I test my pigs and so forth, is I'll keep females out of what I've taken to the locker and, got a half a pig and sold it to somebody else, the other half, or within my family, I'll have them get a pig and we'll test the meat, and so I can do quite a bit of that testing by using family members and myself and so forth. And so I found that I really liked the texture and the tenderness of the Mang in that cross. And I found that it didn't really take a lot of Mang to get what I really wanted there and the product that I really wanted. And it's because they're so highly, I guess that's why I was kind of going with it. There's not a many pigs out in the country. And so they're really kind of highly, so to speak, probably inbred overall. There's not a lot of differences between them and so forth. So you would breed them and you go, yeah, that's definitely a Mang. You can tell by looking at them, and you would only have maybe a quarter or a third Mang in that pig, but you could tell by looking at them that they got Mang in them.
Yeah.
So that's kind of where I'm currently at. I don't know if I skipped over anything. No. That was kind of basically my history is a lot of, AI, a lot of collection of boars, running a boar stud that's of 60 boars, having the experience to manage, 2,400 sows or 1,200, 2,400, 5,000, and then 10,000 sows, being able to manage that and still be profitable and so forth, and teach basically, 200 people how to breed a sow, how to raise pigs and so forth. So that part of my education, although it was a little bit stressful and so forth, I thought I was basically on vacation when I started working for Smithfield because, living on a farm and farming, the ground that we had for dryland wheat and then raising pigs and stuff, we'd work all the time. And, I could go to Smithfield and basically have days off and stuff. So it wasn't really too bad of work. But, but anyway, that's kind of my background.
Well, that's great. So I want to ask you about the Mang, and I know with the breeding experience and the closed herd, and we'll get into this here in a second, you've really been able to track a lot of your genetics with your line breeding and just really being able to nail that down. But did bringing in that Mang, did that slow down your finish time? Did that push it back much? Did it? I assume that there's probably some effect there with the grow
yeah.
out.
There's no. Yeah, and definitely, Troy. They are slower. That was the other reason I didn't want a lot in them also. So that was part of the challenge, is how much of the Mang I want in there. And so I finally come to the conclusion that a quarter to a third was about right. And so, the feed out, the Duroc Burke, you can't beat a Duroc Burke in terms of growth and all that. And I call it Duroc Burke, and it's truly a Duroc Burke with some York in there because obviously they started from New York and had to, but I call those synthetics basically. So my synthetic Duroc Burke, those pigs, we usually start, you'll have some that are better and so forth, but basically as a whole, you'll start around 150 days to 275 to 300. And then, they'll kind of scatter somewhere in there as a group and so forth, another month and a half as a group, depending on how many you're feeding and so forth, and how many's in the pen and how many's in the group and so forth. But with a Mang, I mean, most of the time with that cross, you would probably look closer at that's for sure 6 months, but closer to probably 7 months old, and maybe some stragglers on out a little bit, but
which isn't
but
bad
that
at
was
all.
the purpose.
Yeah.
No, and boy, what it did for the pork chops and so forth was just, I mean, they made them so tender, and I would say the tender and the flavor is what really that whole combination. And I probably give the Mang probably too much credit there, possibly, but because the Duroc and Burke is probably one of the best pork chops, I believe. But that Mang in there, I mean, I've compared them and so forth, where I've had everything the same and have the Mang. And you got to remember, line breeding, I'm trying to breed everything consistently the same, so there's not a lot of outcross there.
Yeah.
And I know people will think, I got the York in there and I can't get the consistency and stuff. When you line up, I mean, I'm talking when I first started there, I was breeding aunts and uncles with my Burke, and I'm breeding the same with my Duroc. I mean, they're really close, half brother, half sisters, back together, and so forth. So when I bring in the line after I've studied this and decided what I want to bring in, I'll line those up close. I mean, I don't want this to be like you got to have them line bred, and so you line breed. You just don't line breed any line. And your listeners, there's a lot of young listeners there. I've listened to your show since you pretty much started, I think. And there's a lot of people that don't know a lot about breeding hogs, and you just don't jump in and line breed hogs and so forth. It's got to be something that you've kind of planned, I believe. And it's genetics that a lot of times it's genetics themselves that have been line bred. That's usually the best ones. If it's worked there and then you continually to do that, usually works the best. But line breeding's not something for everybody, and you got to know kind of why and what you're doing.
Right.
What are you trying to do when you line breed? Well, I'm wanting to breed consistency, and I told you earlier there I wanted to get a little more intermuscular marbling, so my concentration on doing that was a little bit higher when I brought my Duroc in. That was the purpose of bringing that Duroc in, was the intermuscular marbling.
Yeah,
which it did very well.
Yeah, and I know. I mean, this is really more for me as just wrapping my brain around it, because I like to try to visualize this in my head. But and maybe there's other listeners that are thinking the same thing. But when you're bringing in that Mang and you say, okay, I want some Mang in it, but that first generation, of course, there's 50%, and then you got to go the next generation, and then different generations, and so keeping track of all that, and like you said, isolating what you want to isolate, and breeding back what you want to breed back, but trying to remove what you don't want, and I think that's fascinating, and to be able to manage all of that and keep all that straight is no easy task. And when I think of line breeding, the old adage I've always heard was it's called line breeding when it works, and it's inbreeding when it doesn't work. So when you don't get the things you want, but yeah. So I think, like you said, that experience and understanding what to look for. This is more than just looking at a pig and saying, okay, conformation looks okay, it's a good looking pig. Let's just keep running with that.
Troy, my experience with line breeding, and we've done this when we were raised the Durocs. My brother and I did it then too. My experience is it's worked more times than it didn't. Mm-hmm. And when you were talking there, and I was thinking back, I go, man, most of the time it works. And I think the reason why is because I planned it out so in detail of what I'm trying to line breed and what hogs I'm line breeding and which ones I'm line breeding. That's why it worked.
Yeah.
And that's where I get back is it takes a little bit of that planning to do it and to do it right. That you just don't wing it and go out and put brother sisters together and just say, oh, here they are. They're line bred now. Well, why did you do it? What genetics did you use? And so forth. But I mean, most of the time I've already taken out of, as I go, I've already taken out anything that didn't work, let's say, and people think you're going to get, I don't know, some genetic defect, I guess, and so forth. And you really don't, but the bad traits will come to the surface and so forth. And you got to know, if you do see that, you got to know, okay, where did that come from? Why did that happen? And work it that way. And it might be you never do it again if it's bad enough. It depends how bad enough it was. But what I found is that back when I was line breeding my Yorks, before I really got into the meat part, what I found with my Yorks is I could have 3 different litters out of obviously out of 3 different sows. But what I was going to say is out of say boars that were similar bred, and I would have sets of pigs that all look the same. And that's when you got where you want to get, is that when things get consistently the same. My goal is to have a sow herd that's basically all the same.
Yeah.
It's a lot easier to get a boar to put on them or use a boar to put on them when your sow herd is consistently the same.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's the thing that, so yeah, on your Facebook page, kind of flipping through some of your pictures there and see, these good looking litters. And of course, see this pig that you've built, the conformation, the body mat, all that, just, really good looking animals. But if you could, speak into this a little bit, because this is something that I'm still extremely novice at, and that is when you look at characteristics of the pig that you want to keep. It's not like there's 1 or 2, and then you can just isolate that and say, well, okay, I'm identifying this in this pig, or I'm identifying this in that pig, and then we're going to move forward in these individual lines. There's things that, of course, overlap. So, sometimes it's stuff you're not seeing until the pig's actually on the plate. But then some of it's conformation, mothering skills, litter size, teat placement, all those type of things. Are there characteristics that you set absolute highest, like we talked about, the meat quality, but absolute highest, and then you say, okay, well, this trumps that, and so I like that, but I'm not too crazy about this, but this is definitely more important, so I'm going to let that slide. Unpack that for me, if you could, if that even makes any sense.
Yeah, I think I know what you're asking. So the number one thing is structural soundness. Is that what you're asking?
Yeah.
So structural soundness trumps everything.
Okay.
Because if you don't have an animal that is truly sound off both front and the back, then the longevity of that animal is going to be short. If you're naturally breeding, the female won't be able to handle a big boar or whatever the case is. But so structural correctness, I think, trumps everything.
Mm-hmm.
And then after that, there's some characteristics on breeding hogs that I think you can get done over years and so forth. And that's the toughness of breeding hogs. They're basically tough, that can survive the environments. Nothing here is babied. I mean, pigs have to be pretty tough around here to survive.
Yeah.
And I think that's something that you can kind of build into pigs, is that toughness and that survivability that they have. So that's really important to me, as well as the structural correctness.
Mm-hmm.
But kind of after that, because once you have that as a base, and you've selected that in every breed that you do, they're sound, they're good. Once you select that, I think everything else becomes kind of easy.
Okay.
And by easy, I mean, well, now I can concentrate on some meat quality. And so you might get the meat quality, but they're not real sounds, let's say. But they will be, because I'm line breeding within.
Right.
So when I'm trying to line breed my product, it's all within there. So everything's really the same. And so everything I've got, I breed back, because the basis has already been selected.
Right.
And so you can really then concentrate on what you want to concentrate on. I don't get into too much. The show pigs, obviously I do. But in terms of the meat hogs, if we're talking about that, I mean, I don't get into too much about what they look like and so forth like that. I've really gotten into concentrating on the quality of the meat product. So that's kind of, like I said there before, is that if I'm keeping some gilts out of there, I'll process a barrow and see what he looks like. And then if I'm right, which most of the time I am right, I mean, I pretty much know what I'm going to get when I do it.
Yeah.
And all that has been forecasted and laid out in your plan that was done a long time ago. And so you have less misses when you plan and organize your breedings, and your genetics are true to what you're doing. They're consistent. They're the same. You're selecting the same thing in terms of the soundness and so forth. And it just makes it a lot easier. I think that answers
Yeah,
yeah,
exactly. And it's in my mind, I'm trying to visualize this, and it's like a funnel. So, like you said, with line breeding and the successes that you have, then each generation you're just removing the variables. So it allows you to be
you're fine tuning those little things, because obviously not every animal's perfect in what you want. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that you have a consistent product. I mean, you pretty much ought to be able to put a mating together and know what the outcome's going to be. Mm-hmm. And that's because of how you prepared yourself for that success. You pretty much ought to know that. Now, if you just go and you AI something, now that's a little bit different. So if I go and AI to another boar, I'm not going to know that possibly. No. Right. But I'm talking within my herd here. I pretty much ought to know and expect what those pigs are going to look like and what's going to come out of those.
Yeah. And like I said, that's the experience, having the experience itself just in raising hogs, but then also that experience in your genetic line that you've established and being able to nail that down. So I know I asked you this last time because I liked your answer. So I want to ask you again
oh gosh,
how in the world do you keep track of all this? So obviously you have some massive computer system with barcode scanners and all that stuff that you've got, right? I mean, that's how the only way you can manage this, right, Neil?
Yeah, you're not going to believe, but I think when you truly love doing what I do, and that's breeding hogs, you kind of have that in your head.
Yeah.
And so a lot of it's done up in my head, but I mean, I've got notepads and so forth. And the last few years, I haven't done the best job that I usually do because I haven't maybe felt that my health hasn't been as great the last couple of years here, but hopefully that's on the rebound and I can get back. But pretty much, I mean, all this, it can be any time of the day. It can be while I'm driving to take pigs somewhere. It can be talking to my phone on the recorder.
Yeah.
It could be anything like that, is that I'll throw ideas and things out, and as they come to me, I feel like I'm a little futuristic in my mind thinking of things. I'm sometimes I think things happen. I can see them in my mind before they happen sometimes. And I feel like that with the pigs. That's why I say, and it's like, it's not a surprise when I put two matings together. I pretty much have planned that and overthought everything. And genetically, I mean, when I'm wanting to select, say I'm not where I want to be in some genetic line there or some breed there, I could spend a year thinking about what I want to do. And that seems to be too long in this time age, but I could spend a long time thinking what I'm going to do there. But as far as records and so forth, I think that's probably what you're asking. I mean, basically notepads and I put some things on my computer and stuff like that, but I've really gone to just notepads, and it's gotten down to where I know what I need to do going forward. Maybe this might be the place to kind of inject that on and so forth, but I have got a set of gilts that I'm kind of redoing, and redoing is probably the wrong word, but I don't know what other word to use. But my breeding base, my sow base, and redoing means when I started there, I took some York sows, bred them to Burke, basically. I did. And I did that with my Durocs. I did that with my Mangs. I did that with all of them, and then crossed them up and so forth. And right now I got a set of gilts that I've done I took my Duroc and my Burke. And so if you remember, I told you I AI'd back then to get that started because I had to. I didn't have those hogs on the farm, obviously.
Yeah.
Well, now I have them on the farm, and I've lined them up and put them together. I've seen the barrows hanging. I've seen them on my plate. I know what I got. Where back when I started this, I didn't know what I had. I mean, it was pretty much obviously I studied it, but I was guessing. So I've started doing. I've redone it, and I think you think, well, why would you redo those sows, and why would you do that? Well, after a time period, obviously those sows get old. You got to regenerate things, and you can only keep so many sows. What I'm telling you, what I'm doing, probably ought to be on 100 sow farm, or at least, or maybe even a 500 sow farm, but I'm trying to do it within 50 sows. And so you've got to get rid of some of those genetics. So when you put that first cross together, you'll get the offspring when you AI them to a Duroc or a Burke. And then those sows basically kind of got to go bye-bye, right, because you don't have room, and so forth. And so I'm kind of regenerating that. And what I think will happen is the genetic progress will be better. And that's because I'm using my own hogs. I know what that looks like. And I can just keep breeding them and get back to the cross and get more consistency, even more consistency, because these gilts, they're out of Duroc and they're out of Burke. And you go down there, and unless you know what a Duroc and a Burke looks like in terms of the ears, you wouldn't be able to tell them conformation-wise really apart.
Yeah.
They're really very, very similar. And so I'll take those now and I'll breed them to Duroc, I'll breed them to Burke, and vice versa. And I think I will make a big genetic jump on my meat quality and my sow quality, and I'll have a more consistent herd than what I even have now. And so I've started that, breeding them, and we'll see where that goes.
Yeah. Well, that's exciting. That's neat stuff. It blows my mind. I mean, and that was the part, setting you up with that question there, and that's the part that just really stuck in my mind the last time we talked is just get the feeling and talking with you that you really love what you do. You put a lot of thought and a lot of time into it, and this is more than a job. It's even more than a hobby. It's really your lifestyle, and so it doesn't require all of this heavy lifting when it comes to record keeping and all that, because you like I say, you just know, and the 40 years of hog raising you have and experience just allows you to look out there and say, I pretty much know what I'm going to get when these two go together, and how that's going to shake out. And then of course your management, we didn't get into the physicalness of your management, how you actually are physically separating these pigs and keeping them where they need to be, so nobody's getting out. You're not getting you're not getting the crossbred that you didn't want, because you're managing your herd well, not only in your mind but actually on the pasture itself.
Yeah.
Well, okay, so I want to be sensitive to your time, especially since I made you do this twice. But when I asked you last time, I asked you about future plans. 5 years from now, where do you see Trifecta Natural Pork? And it started a really interesting conversation that could almost be a whole nother podcast.
We hope you have enjoyed this episode.
But I want to revisit that
Pig
with you. And
to learn more about
you
our
said it first
podcast,
last
or to
time. You
submit
said, well,
topics or recommend guests for future
I'm not the spring chicken I used to be. I mean, people are starting to do the math. I've already done the math, of course. You're 40 years of pig experience. You did start at 3, so you could either be 43 or you could be a little bit more older than that. But when I asked you 5 years, where do you see yourself in 5 years? Give me your answer. What if you recall what you said last time? Where do you see yourself in 5 years?
I kind of laughed at you, I believe, and said, I'm 63 years old.
Right, yeah.
You said, what's the problem?
Exactly. Yeah. So?
Yeah. I mean, obviously it's at 63. I've been thinking a lot of where I want to go and so forth. And here I'm starting some new genetics over and so forth like that. And I don't know where or how that'll start or stop or end or whatever. I just thought that was the need for where I need to go next and so forth, even no matter what my age is and whatever. And so I kind of I've been thinking for a while, had one guy interested in this thought process, is that I'd really like to continue the meat pigs anyway on, which has to continue the Yorks, obviously, because they're the base and the foundation of the whole thing. But to continue those with getting someone to be interested to work with me for a couple of years. And basically, I pay them. They like it. They decide they want to work here. And basically, we kind of reverse the situation over time, is that then they start paying me and they start owning the operation, basically. So it's they pay for my retirement, and I'll still continue to help. Obviously, not as physical as time goes on. I don't want to do the physical labor. Obviously, that's the purpose of reducing and getting rid of stuff. But maybe taking pigs to the processor, or taking them to the butcher shop or the restaurant, or whatever the case is, however I can help. But basically just kind of invert that to where I pay them and then they pay me as time goes on. And they basically own an operation that's already going and already established, and with my guidance of how to breed, what to breed, and how to do it, they learn that type information from me over time, and basically just turn the farm over to that person that wants to run the farm. And so that's kind of where I see Trifecta going, if I get anybody interested and so forth. And if I've had a couple people that I've talked to, but we kind of both some hiccups for obvious reasons and so forth. But anyway, that's kind of where I see it going.
Yeah, and that's what really intrigued me. And you hear about these things, out here in the cloud, the World Wide Web. You hear there's these guys that are ready to kind of go into the sunset when it comes to their farms. And we hear the younger generations coming up, their biggest complaint is, well, there's all these barriers to entry. Land's so expensive, or infrastructure or resources are so expensive, or I don't even know what the heck I'm doing, and it's just hard to apprentice under somebody. But in our conversation last time, I just got my wheels turned. It's like, man, there's so much opportunity here for somebody to come along, shadow you, obviously have a job, make an income, because your farm is profit. It does produce a profit. So come get a job, get paid, but set under the tutelage of you and your 40 years of experience to say, hey, I'm going to show you how I do this. You'll garner that information. You'll build the experience while you're putting some money in your pocket. And then there's that opportunity to say, hey, now let's kind of flip it and make this you start buying me out as you become more comfortable with the process, and of course glean the profits from the business and start buying me out. And that way you get an opt-out package, and somebody else gets to step in and take over a fully functioning, profitable farm. I think it's amazing. A great opportunity for somebody.
Yeah, there would be no, I mean, they're basically paying for my living cost to retire and so forth. And all the equipment, everything stays here and so forth.
Yeah.
And they get to use it. They get the genetics, they get the hogs, they get everything as is. There's no start over. It's just, they got to pay me probably until I pass away is how I see it. But anyway, that's kind of
you have to sleep with one eye open if you put those stipulations in there, though. I said you got to sleep with one eye open if you put those stipulations in there.
Yeah, that's why I was a little bit careful there. You don't want to say that.
Exactly. You have to pay me until I die. And it's like,
you watch a lot of TV shows like me.
Yeah, exactly. So. It's like, hey, who made dinner tonight? Yeah. Shoot.
But yeah, to basically to that point, over time, and I see it as a pretty good opportunity. It's got to be someone that really loves to do it and so forth. And I mean, there's a lot of advantages to being your own boss and having your own schedule and so forth. I mean, my problem is it's kind of like running a dairy. You can't really go anywhere, but when you have somebody else involved, it kind of gives you a chance to get away from it and go do something. Somebody else is taking care of it. But that's kind of probably one of the biggest problems with with raising pigs is that, I mean, they got to be fed, and if you got a full production of pigs going and so forth, you always got some. And that's usually what happens on a hog farm. You're usually always farrowing, you're always breeding, and you're always notching pigs or giving iron shots or moving pigs or whatever. There's always something to do almost all the time. So it's a continual production.
Yeah. But like I say, that's that audience is finite. There's not a whole lot of people out there that would want to take that on, but there's still a good audience out there, and then there's of course just a lot of people that don't know what they don't know, and appreciate, hey, a job that's not a 9-to-5 desk job outside. They want to be outside. They want to be learning more of this back to the land type situation. So just kind of putting those feelers out there. So hopefully,
it's kind of like, what do people do when they reach older retirement and stuff? Which way you head? I mean, usually all that stuff gets sold and gone, and it disappears and so forth.
Yeah.
And I kind of wanted to make it to where that's not the case. So all the work that I put in can live on through somebody else is what I'm hoping.
Yeah.
And I don't even know if that's possible, Troy, but if you see farm sales, a guy worked his whole life, and you go to his farm sale, and that's it. He's done.
Mm-hmm.
All the ground's sold. Family don't have it anymore. All the equipment's gone. It's kind of sad because the person worked his whole life and it's all gone now.
Yeah, exactly. And then on top of that, the physical stuff's gone, the tangible stuff's gone, but then just decades, even generations of information are just gone. Yeah, that's gone too. So, like if nobody takes you up on this, here's 40 years of your experience that you're willing to pour into somebody if they would just listen and participate. And, if nobody would take you up on that, it's like, okay, this is a loss. This is a loss of great resource, of great knowledge and wisdom in this area. And I agree. It is sad not to see more of a transition.
Yeah. Well, how many times do you say, Mom used to make this recipe.
Yep.
How'd she make it? Nobody has the recipe, right?
Yeah.
That information just goes sometimes, and that's kind of what I'm trying to avoid happening, I guess, and so forth. But we all talk about that, where's the recipe? Let's make it like Mom used to, or Grandma used to, or whoever. And nobody had the recipe. That information's gone.
Yeah, well, and I think of, C.S. Lewis always referred to it as chronological snobbery. As we got more advanced, quote unquote, then we didn't really need the information from the past. But I just think, man, I would have given anything to be able to plug a cable into my grandfather's head and my grandmother's head and download everything they knew about living through the Great Depression, through the war. Grandfather could fabricate anything. Built his own motorcycle from scratch and his own tractor implements and everything from scratch. And it's like all that information just gone. It passed with him. And it's just like, wow, there's just so much information we're losing out on, and especially in these things that are so unique, and they're not just cookie cutter stuff like lawyer, doctor, blah blah blah.
Or how long has line breeding been around, and really where do you get information on how to do it or what to do?
Yeah, I mean
it's for years, and some great men have done it, but nobody's really tapped into their brain to figure out why and what and all that information just goes somewhere.
Yeah. I mean, I think just the hog associations, the specific breed associations, maybe just scratch the surface of even discussing what line breeding is. But I mean, that's just so superficial compared to what we're talking about here of full-blown production and the benefits of all of that, and not being so true to a specific breed for the sake of keeping the breed alive. This is being true to the goal of having good quality meat. And so I think it's a totally different approach. And yeah, you're right. I can't think of a single resource that I'm like, oh yeah, if you want to talk about line breeding for good quality meat, here's where you go. You go to this website, or you get this book, or you listen to this specific person. It's just, you're right. It's just not out there. It has the banner hasn't been waved enough. It's out there. It's just the banner hadn't been waved enough, because there's people like you out there that are doing this kind of stuff. And it's like, yeah, here we go. So yeah, somebody needs to sit you down and have you write a book over the next 6 years, 5
Well,
years.
Yeah, and I don't even know what I'd put in that book, I guess. But
That's right.
the guys that I followed in the purebred industry that has done those things, and they're dying off left and right.
Yeah.
They've reached that age to where they're gone. And I think back, it's like, why didn't I ask this guy this question that I had about it? And you didn't for some reason, just like you didn't get grandma's recipe when
Right.
you should have. And it's just it's gone. And I don't know. And not that Trifecta's got the best or anything like that. It's just I put a lot of work into it. I'd like to see it go on down the road and continue to produce and so forth. And that's kind of where and if it doesn't happen, I guess it don't happen. That's fine. And everything would go on and so forth. But that's kind of where I see the future. And we'll see. I could probably be talking to you in 5 years and saying, hey, I'd like to find somebody to take this over, and no one's done it. It could be the same. Who knows? Or everything could be sold at that point. So anyway,
or you could come back and say, I've developed a 10-year plan, Troy. So here's what I'm doing when I'm 73. It's hard to tell. You just don't know. But no. So obviously this is a great segue into possibly some ears listening to this are like, okay, I'm intrigued. I want to know more. So Neal, if somebody wants to find out more about you, maybe reach out to you, how can they do such?
The Facebook Messenger is pretty good.
Okay.
I look at that quite a little bit. If you don't hear from me or whatever, don't be afraid to call me. My number's on my web page, Facebook. You can find it pretty easily. Trifecta Natural Pork is the web. It's the same with the Facebook, Trifecta Natural Pork. Saxton Genetics I go under a lot too when I'm selling show pigs and so forth. Either one of those.
Yeah. And that's great. I'll make sure to include that in the show notes so people can see that if they want to reach out, not only follow, but if they want to reach out and ask some more questions from Neal of not only what he's talking about with the farm, but obviously I'm sure he'd be willing to talk any of the details you'd have in breeding or some specifics there. So
for sure.
Well, Neal, man, I appreciate it. And like I said, first of all, thank you so much for your patience and coming back again. I think second time was better than the first. So we were able to just polish the conversation even more. So good stuff. Well, I really appreciate Neal coming on the podcast. I hope you guys enjoyed that discussion as much as I did. It was a pleasure talking to him. I wanted to point out something that I don't know if you guys have noticed. That you're obviously trying to tweak with the technology, trying to tweak my setup here. My system that I use is the same system I do all my video edits on. So there's all kinds of things, all kinds of inputs coming in. So I've been playing around a little bit with the reverb and just some of the fine tuning of the podcast. So this episode, right now, I don't have reverb on this track where I'm recording these bumpers. But if you listen to me talking with Neal, there is a little bit of reverb on my side. So let me know if you have an opinion on that, whether you think that's distracting, you think it enhances, it doesn't. I like it a little bit because I think it just gives a little more depth, but reverb, of course, makes it sound like you're in a cave to some degree, but I've just got just a hint of reverb, but we could obviously add tons more and it would be ridiculous. But yeah, if you've got any comment on that, obviously, Troy@redtoolhouse.com, you can send me an email about that and let me know. Also, Patreon, if you want to be a Patreon supporter, we truly appreciate that. That goes a long way in keeping this going. And just as I mentioned, some of these upgrades that we're doing and maintenance and hard drives and archiving everything. And then, of course, if you're at our SAL or tier level or board tier level, then you get through Patreon, you get access to the podcast without these bumpers, without my sponsors, without my pre-recording stuff. It just goes straight into the interview with the individual guest for that day. So check that out if you like. There'll be links in the show notes as well. Well, I appreciate everybody listening and appreciate all the feedback we're getting. Pray you all have a great week. Take care.
We hope you have enjoyed this episode of the Pastured Pig Podcast. To learn more about our podcast or to submit topics or recommend guests for future episodes, visit redtoolhouse.com.